East Tennessee. So if you,
Oh, okay.
yeah, Little Tennessee River, where it kind of terminates. If you know anything about the history there, there's a couple archaeological sites. One's called Rose Island, and the other one's called Ice House Bottom. And they've been continuously inhabited for 10,000 years. And that's one of the reasons I chose East Tennessee, because it's been inhabited that long. And then also there is the Bat Cave Stone, which is it's similar to the Judicula Stone that was found here in that same area in Bat Creek. So it's called the Bat Creek Stone, with some unusual scratchings and writings on it. So we go pinging around in the caves. And again, before we started recording, I was saying, we bring with us with different colored lights in the optical spectrum, so we can see things that are on the cave. So we got a yellow light, we got the regular black lights that are little handheld flashlights. Then we bring another color array where we can put filters over and then get different color spectrum in there. But I find when you start blending the yellow with the black lights, things are coming out. Or if you have the red with the black light, you get sort of a purple, and they're just different things that come out. And going into a cave system here, there's an enormous amount of water coming off the walls, and different growth that would come back after a couple hundred years. So the inhabitants at that time, if you were going to leave a message for future generations, you sure wouldn't carve something on the side of a wall like you could in Chaco Canyon, because there it's arid, it's going to last forever. So we were looking sort of in the center of the cave, or something that would have been chipped or chiseled and fall down. And the way that we found a couple stones that were carved at perfect right 90-degree angles that stuck up out of the floor as a pyramid, and just going this direction visually versus looking for scratchings. But interestingly, there's an enormous amount of optic different colored paints down there with different varying scratches, from marks of 3, different symbols that look Chinese, gun, and different like water, and different symbols that people have put down there in different optic colored paints of their own. So when they're coming through the cave, if they have a black light, they can find their way through with their own markings in different chambers and come in and out. And that's kind of, I'm really interested in the ancient history, especially in this area, to see how these cycles are repeating again and again. So you're asking what I'm doing besides getting some of the stuff out here on the farm and trying to keep the demonetization and the hit pieces from Vice News against me. Yeah, to keep myself still alive and floating above water, because definitely over some target, or else there wouldn't be this much negative publicity about my channel, as well as others covering grand solar minimum and solar changes affecting our food production globally.
Wow. Okay. Well,
I'm Dave Dubyne here. Hey,
I'm gonna hit record right now, and we'll fire this up, because this is gonna be a fun one. Okay, here we go. And boom, we're back for another episode of Alphacast. I'm Mike Winner, and I'm here as always with Dr. Bear Paul Lando, coming to you live and correct from the beautiful state of Jefferson on the Smith River here on the border of California and Oregon. We are so pumped for the fall, even though it's been a little chilly, which should be fitting for today's guest, David Dubyne from Adapt 2030. This is going to be a great one. David's returning. It's been about, 2 years since we've had David on. He was one of our first big guests on Alphacast, and he was so cordial enough to come on when we were just a little YouTube channel with 800, if that, subscribers, and really helped us out a lot back then. And we're just really excited to catch up with David and see what he's been up to. Lots been going on with Alfa Vedic. If you guys are new to Alfa Vedic, check us out at alfavedic.com. I will make this short and sweet today, Bear. We've been getting some people complaining about our long intros to our free 2-hour podcast with no ads. So I'm sorry about that.
You're kidding.
Yeah.
That kind of makes me want to do 20 minutes of infomercials that we've never done.
Exactly.
Did you ever complain to the TV stations about too many advertisements before the program and during the programming, and then a break between the end of the program and the next program starting? I don't think so. It's
unbelievable. It's really unbelievable. And believe it or not, those haters, we actually have a community that cares about what we're going to talk about in these little short intros, like the fact that we just did an amazing little giveaway from Leela Labs, which does this amazing quantum technology, which I have right here. Their infinity block behind me, David. Really interesting technology that you might want to look into, because I know you're keen on this stuff. It creates a toroidal field, according to their studies, that allows you to charge different metallic objects with quantum energy. And they also have brilliant healers that are internationally known that can see frequencies and imbue frequencies in these cards. And then you can take those frequencies and use them to heal and help others. So we have this, we had this giveaway with three 4-packs of their DNA cell frequency cards, which are having great effect to those who have gotten the jibba jabba doodah. And we went ahead and we did a giveaway. So I just want to announce our giveaway to our co-op. Congratulations to Brian Alex, Amanda Miller, and Lydia. You guys each are the winners of the 4-pack. So congratulations to you. We're really excited to get those to you. So we'll connect on DM on Patreon and get those over to you. Besides that, that's about all I got. Oh, Cordal 2.0 launched today or yesterday. For those who aren't familiar with Cordal, and David, I'd love to talk to you a little about crypto today, because I know you're keen on that. You know, the crypto sphere is very interesting. It seems like a lot of it's been co-opted into Wall Street 2.0. We're seeing the SEC crack down on that. I'm part of a project called Cordal, which is kind of like a Bitcoin 2.0 in the sense that it was very much from the ground up, made from scratch blockchain project with a bunch of cypherpunks, no corporation behind it, very decentralized, all open source. You can find out more at cordal.org. What's unique about Cordal, besides the egalitarian minting protocol that shares every minute block reward with everybody minting on the network, which doesn't require any ASIC miner or anything big, hefty machine to do it. It's just based on time and proving yourself over time. Is that the database is very fascinating how it works as basically a decentralized CPU. And we're very close to launching our data nodes, which will be decentralized web hosting, or truly decentralized web hosting. So David was just talking about how he's been censored and being attacked by the centralized forces. Well, we are creating a solution that will allow for a completely censor-proof internet. Very exciting time. So check that out at cordal.org. That's QORTAL.org. Today, David Dubyne returns for a grand solar minimum update and how we might prepare for the changes it will bring to a world already on the brink. Grand solar minimum expert David Dubyne from Adapt 2030 returns to Alphacast for an update on the effects of the incoming solar cycle. Drastically cooling temperatures are already upon us, and the cyclic solar-induced climate changes have been historically paired with the rise and fall of empires. Its impact will indeed be dramatic, especially in light of the purposeful chaos now being orchestrated on virtually every level of our lives. In our first episode, David shared stunning information on the disruptive effects of a cooling climate on food production, finance, and every aspect of human interaction. Take heart, though, as we'll frame this intensity of this topic with solutions available to most. David is masterful in his presentation of the quote-unquote science behind the grand solar minimum, but always from the larger perspective of thriving versus surviving, and the spiritual opportunities belying all such epochal times. And yes, I believe we are entering a new epoch. We can get into some theories on that. Bear Lando, how are you on this glorious morning, Thursday morning?
Doing wonderful, and especially excited about our talk. David, thanks for being with us again. And yeah, as Mike said, I want to echo that. Thank you so much. You know, you really helped us with our beginnings here. We're still kind of newbies, but you know, just trying to get our, you know, the message out just like you are. So thank you for being with us again. I wanted to reconnect with you for actually quite a while. As you know, I run a farm here. I farm full time. I've done it for a good number of years now. And it's interesting because when you do that, you have a feedback mechanism, you know, with which you're growing in nature around you that tells you exactly what's going on out there. And not only from year to year, but you get to, if you stick with it long enough, get to see more long-term trends. And what I've noticed in about the last decade is, we're getting earlier and earlier falls. The last 3 years, we've had these kind of freak early frost, and it's required me to harvest earlier every year. This year, we started earlier in anticipation of that, but the frost came earlier, so we're going to lose some crops again because of it. So I'm pretty convinced that something's happening out there with the climate. I don't think it's our fault. I think there's larger cycles, at play. And of course, that's where your expertise lies. And, there's that old saying that things happen gradually, then all of a sudden. Well, I kind of suspect that we're in the all of a sudden stage right now. So what do you think? And, I'd like to get into current events and how they're playing in with, your knowledge base and what you bring. But if we could, maybe have a little bit of a preface as far as how you got into this. We can make it short because I know you've done this 1,000 times. And, just maybe a little cliff notes of what solar minimum is in the first place. So thanks again, and take it away.
Yeah, thanks for having me back. And I'm so glad that you're expanding, and still in the information space, because the people you interview and all the guests that I see you come on, because, I get your emails when you have new interviews. And, when I'm preparing something, I'll click on and listen off the side of my ear there. It's great that you keep going and keep putting out such valuable information this time of change right now, because this is what we need, is so many minds coming at all these problems that are coalescing at the same time here. And we're going to need a myriad of solutions. So I love that you went from, 800 and you're well over 10,000 now, and it's going to continue to grow because you reach that rollover point where then it's 10 and then suddenly it's 25 and then suddenly it's 50. And the more the world seems to be turned upside down on its head, the more people are out there looking for solutions. And then, they're you'd be surprised what you consider as just a normal go to work, hardworking person that's always bought the mainstream media's explanations for XYZ is suddenly going, wait a second, maybe I need to look over here for some alternative information, because what has been fed so long doesn't seem to fit what's happening anymore. And I've noticed that it seems to be a mass awakening of, this epoch you're talking about is a vibrational change. So when you look at it in terms of power structure from top down governance, that was set in place in a different vibrational frequency field, and people were born into that same frequency field. So something that was in the 1940s, 1950s, you were born, grandparents in, or older parents born into that. They were born into the field, so that top-down approach worked because they were born into the same frequency. But now as we're transitioning out, and, we've actually into the age of Aquarius back last year, and, the planets were so close together, and, the telescope looking at those just a couple of degrees from each other, transition to a faster energy, and people are awakening from that. So from a realistic approach, the way they have put this top-down pyramidal structure, and everybody knows the pyramid, top 0.0001% down, corporations, the military, and then people at the bottom. Okay, that worked for that denser energy field. But as the sun's stepping down, our solar system's changing, and I'll go into all the changes on all the planets that have occurred in the last year and a half. The control structure of the elite over the planet needs to change also, because their frequency field is changing. Their awareness is, people are piercing through the veil now. So a new system of control needs to be put in place for the new vibration frequency. And then you talked about cryptocurrency, the old fiat money system based on acquisition, war, and control. That doesn't work anymore. So what is it going to be now? Well, it's moving to crypto. And like you say, crypto can be your bondage or it can be your freedom. Ticket out, both apply with the same technology, as with all technologies. So when you look at it, so many things are shifting right now with this great reset, and they're even broadcasting it. They're resetting on purpose, and they're telling you they're resetting because they have to reset, because the old power down structure is not going to hold, and everybody's awakening too. So now a whole new way of life being controlled, and those with the money and the power broker and the elite are still trying to keep themselves in control, moving into the faster energy field. And we can see it all around us. Things aren't making sense anymore. People are asking a lot more questions, but then there's this whole new grid moving in. The separation of people, I think they're terrified of us and our manifestation capabilities, not only you and myself, visually by ourselves creating our own reality and busting through this chrysalis, for a better word, but hundreds of people getting together. Elite are terrified of this because our manifestation's ramping up and faster and almost real time now. So one person, yeah, they can do what they're taught or programmed or thought to think to manifest for the elite. What they want is the outcome. But put a bunch of people together that do question the narrative, don't go along with that anymore. And that becomes a real threat, because 10 people, 100 people that have an alternative way to manifest in this frequency field is definitely throwing a wrench out there. That's the reason I really believe that we're being so separated at the moment. Our capabilities to overthrow these reigns of power are at our grasp again. And it only comes around once every several thousand years. And you see the amount of effort, time, coordination, and all out destruction of everything we've ever known to keep us separated during this most pivotal time of change. Now, it might sound a little outlandish, but when you start to understand the frequency of the sun is changing, and the output in the visual spectrum, and the amount of cosmic rays bombarding our planet, which also have an effect on species themselves, you see all these things lining up into perfection right now. It is an awakening, but this whole dense, darker energy power wants to grab you and like pull you back into the soup as we're trying to rise out each day more vibrationally light as we go around the full circle of the yugas here, as the best way I can describe it. I'm really getting back into the Indian Vedic texts and the yuga cycles, because I do believe we're coming out of that Kali Yuga into the Dwapara Yuga, and the elites know it. They understand these grand solar minimum cycles. They know there's not going to be enough food. It's going to be a lot of panic, and they're going to get overthrown again. So they're trying to stop all this. And then all those other layers of things are happening at the same time. It's such an amazing time to be alive. Truly is.
It is. And I think what you're describing is an overall consciousness shift, and it's a matter of choice. I think people are making right now, as far as, which bandwagon they want to jump on. And the way I see things is that the so-called controllers are really at a disadvantage, because they're playing the same old game by trying to retool their control technologies. And meanwhile, those of us that are going with this shift, it's making available to us all different sorts of insights, new technologies, ways to produce things that aren't reliant on old manufacturing methods. Here on the farm, we're constantly expanding our awareness of how to grow things. We're in the Northwest, and I grow things that are tropical that aren't supposed to grow here. So there's a lot of things we're catching up to. And of course, that thing you're talking about, as far as things speeding up, that's a real phenomena that we can, explain with waveform physics. And so all of these things that weren't available in prior times, including this knowledge of, what makes us tick in the first place, is really putting us, I think, in the most favorable position historically for humanity, even though it really looks like all hell is breaking loose. That's not to minimize all the real things going on, and most likely the chaos will continue to see and also escalate. But I think it's important always to just reframe it in that, we are being led by higher intelligence, including, you mentioned, the sun and planetary bodies and things. Well, those are all living intelligence as well. And of course, when you're in the flow drafting that higher intelligence, then magic starts to happen and all the solutions appear. So sorry, since you opened the door to that, I just want to make a quick comment.
Well, I did open the door because I knew you'd respond to it in a way that I couldn't phrase it, because I have my little niche of understanding the frequency field and the cosmic ray density increases. And then on the planets, you might just sit there and go, whoa, these guys are talking woo-woo mumbo jumbo there, where there's new agey junk. It's not, because let's start out, if we go back to May of 2020, Pluto's atmosphere collapsed. And that should be a wow factor and go, wow, that really has. So there must be some electromagnetic effects happening within our solar system. And then Uranus, 6 months later, reversed its atmosphere. And that should have been a double wow, that's incredible factor. And then Neptune, the rings around there were X-ray jumps that were visible with the naked eye. Now, normally a lot of this stuff would happen in a different spectral wavelength that would require instrumentation to view and quantify. But the X-ray discharge was so heavy that it was visible with the naked eye, jumping off the planet, grabbing on the rings, and then shooting out into what we consider space. But no, it was following on the Birkeland currents and the electric field lines that you can't see, that are invisible to our naked eye. So when you start to see something at this proportion that's so far exponentially above the charts to see X-ray, it's, when you look at an X-ray flare coming off the sun and the way that they categorize different flares from the sun. You got the M flares, and of course, the most famous are the X flares. When you look at that, it actually has an X pattern when it goes zzz, and it comes off the sun. You can actually see that X shape from the discharge pattern with such heavy intensity. But for an outer planet to jump with the X-ray visible to the naked eye out to the rings and then continue down the field lines is just something to behold. And then I was talking before the broadcast here, I have a telescope that I moved out of the back here. Jupiter's auroras were 10x, and they kind of dissipated a little bit as the sun's turned on for solar cycle 25. But when it went to the low just maybe 6 months ago, and even in the last 3 months, you could see blue halos coming off of Jupiter. The aurora were 10x more intense. And then one of the latest things that's happened just 2 months ago is normally when you have northern and southern light, you need a magnetic field. So those lights, the charged particles, can follow down the magnetic field lines, illuminate that, and then we start to get the aurora. And if it's really intense, it'll make like a cylindrical cone where it'll follow a magnetic field line down. And that's why you get some really brilliant blues that are almost like a cylinder coming down. And the auroral ropes, and there's different type of twisting auroral ropes that, positive, negative current going around each other that follow those same field lines. But Mars doesn't really have an atmosphere or a magnetic field that creates an atmosphere like Earth. What it does have, though, is mineral in the crust. And aurora started to come out of even the equatorial bands off of Mars, where the aurora were coming out of the mineral composition of Mars crust. That was about 4 months ago. So I'm looking saying, Earth is next here. If you're going to be coming from the outer planets coming in, so what types of things would it be looking for? And you mentioned toroidal fields there. Jupiter is going to swing past the Earth coming up in the first part of 2022, probably around March. I can give you an exact date if I get back on the JPL models to see when that's going to swing in front. As soon as Jupiter swings around in front of the Earth, we're going to be locked into a second magnetic field until 2024, where it's a perfect square. And that has a looping toroidal field as well associated with it. But if you think about Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune as one new magnetic field forming interlooping on itself as a solid magnetic field, slight, but its own magnetic field, we got Mars and then Earth, which means we're 2 planets away from that. But then we have the sun stepping down, and we're the 3rd planet away from that. Now, nothing goes to 0, so there's probably going to be a balance and equilibrium of that of the decrease off the sun and some sort of equilibrium within that second magnetic field. So if you're talking about looping toroidal waves, we're going to come in and the Earth's going to be right in the center there, 2024. But as Jupiter swings past here, we're going to have an enormous amount of crustal damage coming up here is the best way I can put it. Earth cracks, land subsidence, land upwelling, instant land upwelling like we saw in Haryana in India, earth cracks all over the place. There's as many instances of this happening. So you come into something called the Bosch wall when these 2 toroidal fields are looping in on themselves. There's this equilibrium midpoint where those 2 magnetic fields are over looping on themselves, and it's called the Bosch wall. Well, we're going to be in that Bosch wall square in the center in October of 2024. So if you're looking at this from a perspective of a government trying to still retain control on the planet without sending all out unbelievable panic across the airwaves, we don't even know what's going to happen with the second magnetic field. For sure, after March and April of this year, when Jupiter swings past and we get more locked into it, we'll have a good idea of how much damage it's going to do to the infrastructure on the surface of the Earth. Now, take that into perspective on the possibilities of you coming down into decentralized agriculture, starting with your own garden, regional trading, because things are going to start to get cut off at the edges. So maybe this is some of the reason for the supply chain disruptions. Already a built-in excuse there. Because are you going to come clean with the populace? Like, hey, the reason that bridge collapsed over there. Oh, the reason the rail lines ripped over there. Oh, that landslide that took away that road over there. That was just because it rained a lot. On that land that lifted up 30 feet in the middle of a farm field, that was just because, there was a pipe under there and the gas compressed and it uplifted the earth that way for 2 miles that direction. Like, they're going to give you some easy excuse in the news, but to come clean to say our earth is going to start rifting in the top 2 miles of the crust as we enter the second magnetic field. By the way, your intuition, your manifestation capabilities, and the whole electric circuitry of the planet is going to leave electric striking and plasma discharge right in the skies in front of you for 8 to 10 to 12 seconds, where you're going to see things off Chaco Canyon come to life in front of you in the next 3 years. But please keep going to work. Please keep paying your taxes, and please obey the rule of law. Okay, now let's go.
Wow. And David,
that's all true. And I can prove every
Yeah.
single thing I just said with an enormous amount of backed up science on this and instrumentation, everything you want. I can back all that up.
And when you say science, you're not talking about corporate scientism. You're talking about empirical data that you're collecting on your own or through trusted sources, not necessarily NASA, which we know is the lying entity of the corrupted centralized forces, because we're obviously triggering people in the comments already here. And one thing I said is because we do we have some folks in there that are like, what's he talking about? And to deny the fact that astral bodies have an effect on this, whether you call it a planet, a plane, whatever, that's ridiculous. Of course they do. But what I was going to ask you is, are you familiar with this idea that the Earth is expanding too? That we're going through an expansion part that is related to all these energetics, and that also some of this cracking that we're seeing and is actually due to the Earth growing at this time.
I was hoping you both had the answer for that. Something I wanted to ask you both, because I'm looking for that answer myself. There's a lot of information that I'm trying to collect as data points, but I don't have it all. And you have a little more. That's more your niche of understanding that, and torsion physics and plasma expansion, et cetera, at cores. So I was hoping maybe you could.
Well, maybe Bear has a little insight onto this. Bear?
Well, we could go off into some tangents about that.
You should.
It might be.
Okay. You should.
So, well, I look at things a lot differently. I believe there are technologies involved in the planet itself. Another whole discussion that perhaps are responsible for a lot of the mechanisms that we see and associate with just our reality here. And also there really needs to be a greater understanding of waveforms, because you can't have physicality without a waveform, and then the physicality is nothing more than appearance. But the thing is planetary bodies, just like anything else, are always under a state of flux of going through, states between electrical prolation and oblation, those forces. So it can actually change the appearance of things, how things operate. And, if we're just sitting back and I think arguing about the shape of the world, or perhaps, if the world is in fact living, I think there's more than ample evidence, when you get into the bottom line understanding of just ourselves as people. For instance, we do the same thing that our planet, we'll call it, does, in that we're always going through these electrical fluxes. You even see changes that occur to our bodies in later life, as we, kind of shift between oblation and prolation. And so when you bring in these electrical phenomena into the picture, I think we not only understand that there's a lot more that we aren't even discussing yet, let alone observing, but also it puts us in the power seat in that, on this plane, we are in fact the sentient beings capable of creating those electrical vectors by way of our sentience and our thoughts. And, we are very active participants in this, in this experiment, we'll say. So I know that's kind of roundabout, isn't really answering your question, but, it does open up into an entirely new field that would explain things in entirely different ways. It would be probably very amazing and even stretch the imagination of most people.
And on a more metaphysical side of things too, if we consider that Gaia or Sophia is a living consciousness entity, and we're going through a consciousness expansion right now, that could crystallize in the expansion of the physical form too, of course. So there's when you're talking about these heavenly bodies, these planets, David, too, I think of Rudolf Steiner and his notion of these planets emanating from Earth or from consciousness. And this gets a little trippier, but these are living, breathing entities themselves that are directly electrical, right? And are all communicating each other through the ether or through the electromagnetic, whatever we want to call it, right? This invisible force that you talk about, the Birkeland, whatever we want to talk about. And so we are in a live, like, connected reality. And I think with the materialistic reductionist science that we're forced under, they refuse to look at that. And so, this is really important, I think, for climate and understanding how the climate works, because I personally believe we can affect the climate with our own consciousness. And that's why we've done shows about orgone technology and Wilhelm Reich. And I think it's important because it can help us look at solutions for helping us with our farm here, with impending potential, June and July frost, for all we know, with this grand solar minimum, with the sun's doing, and understanding really what the sun is and what the plasma is and how all this affects directly with our consciousness. So for me, it's really exciting because I believe we are finally getting into the enriched science that we really need to be diving into, and through both observation and understanding the spiritual side of it more.
And Barry, you brought up a little point there. In Melbourne, on that day of rage that was occurring just before the protest, they had the biggest earthquake ever recorded in Melbourne. So you really have to wonder, was that what you were referring to? The human themselves triggering that through the emotional state at that one vector on the planet? Or was it a technological triggered event? And, I'm wondering, I put it into the two camps, because we're starting to see at least some data points where the strictest lockdowns are happening and the most draconian, let's say, removal of people's liberties seem to now have the largest natural disasters happening directly over those areas, whether it be the once in 1,000-year flood, the largest mudslides, volcanic eruptions, or earthquakes themselves. I mean, literally within square feet of where these events are happening. You just got to wonder, is it now the human resonance field that's triggering on, and it has a physical effect on this planetary body here? It's becoming very connected in a correlation now between these events and what's happening on the ground, for a better term.
Yeah. And just like a human body, there are trillions of cells that, are a composite that make up the human body. And there's a central intelligence that has mechanisms to keep things in equilibrium, cleansed, and in a regenerative cycle. And the Earth, regardless of what we think its shape is a living, technology and intelligence in and of itself. So if the cells, which include us on the so-called surface, are creating toxicity, just like in the human body, the Earth will have mechanisms that will discharge pressures, just like on the emotional plane. When we're in some kind of traumatic event in our life, a lot of pressure builds up, and then we usually have to have some event to discharge it, even if it's unpleasant. I believe the Earth does the same thing. Now, of course, we have people on the ground also that are manufacturing weather and trying their best to manipulate that too. But I think far overriding that is just the effect that we have and the mechanisms that within the Earth that are there to keep us cleansed, including in the atmosphere. Lightning is an example of a purifying element whenever it happens. And, how many times after a storm do we go outside when the sun's shining again and we just feel uplifted, and, not just because the sun's out again, but because, we really feel an upliftment from the cleansing, from the pressure release. And it's just like, when you get over a little cleansing yourself that we might call a cold or a flu, after you get over the symptoms, you feel better than ever. So the Earth, as a living sentient being, has those mechanisms that are there at play to give us an opportunity to live another day and have our experience.
I like the after rain air. I'll agree with you. That's one of the best feelings, is going out after an intense thunderstorm and front rolls through. If it's rained for a couple of days, and going out and breathing that refreshed atmosphere and just every cell just comes back to life again. You can smell it. You can taste the freshness. It's something very, I would highly recommend everybody chase the rain, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. Ozone
So I don't
therapy,
wanna-
baby.
That's why surfers are so happy. They were sitting out in the negative islands the whole day as the waves are crashing. They're sitting out right in the zone of that. Yeah.
That's why surfers traditionally are just so chill, right? And just at peace, man. It's like, that's why we talk like this, bro, because it's just, yeah, we're out there. Totally, man. Yeah. So David, let's get into where you're thinking the weather's coming in terms of, do you see this a minimum coming? Are we in it already? What are your kind of feelings now since we last talked? Like I was mentioning on our email, I mean, we're hitting in the low 30s already here in the lower Pacific Northwest in early October with frost coming in already. What are you seeing right now from your side of things?
What you're seeing now, again, it's my personal opinion. It's a lot of people I talk to, and I try to arrive at my own ideas after I synthesize the information. It's going to continue to amplify as pressure systems get locked in over areas for a longer period of time. You know, you got to think about over the last, let's say, I'll even say 200 years since the Dalton minimum, which was a very light grand solar minimum. But if we go back to the Maunder minimum, which was considered a heavy event, dropping Earth's average temperature 1.78 degrees, that's on an average. You got to think that's a drastic shift. That's near 4 degrees Fahrenheit, just as the average. So can you imagine the winters coming in cooler and the periphery seasons being that much cooler? You would take weeks, if not months, off your growth season. So keeping that in mind as just a reference point in time, let's say 1650, well, Earth's pretty much locked in and reestablished an equilibrium with the magnetic field of the sun. So our Earth's magnetic field and the sun's magnetic field, albeit outside the 11-year solar cycle, which dictates what happens in the Pacific Ocean, you get El Nino, La Nina, that had been locked in for about 400 years. So the cloud cells stabilized themselves. The jet streams had locked into their positions. Now you're starting to see these jet streams going out of their normal position, what they call these Arctic vortexes or whatever you like it. Now there's a new term. Like I said, last time we talked, look for this new term, the equatorial vortex, because they had to explain the heat that's bending completely off the equator because the jet streams are going in such disarray. So if the sun's stepping down now into a 400-year event or even more on the intensity, the cloud cells are going to try to readjust themselves, and they're going to fight for space in the atmosphere, right along with the jet streams all colliding. And then the cosmic rays are adding new cloud layer up there around 18,000 feet. So the precipitation events that we're seeing are going to continue to amplify as cloud cells continue to crash in on each other, mixed in with another whole layer on top of the jet streams, trying to fight to find new positions, and they're getting squeezed out. That's why we're getting these intense lows going clear down into central Mexico, even down past Cuba. So the rain events shall continue in intensity, and the droughts where they are now, they're going to lock in for a little bit longer period of time. You know, before it would be a drought for a year, and then it would alleviate, and then you do this back and forth. But the way it's looking now, things are going to start locking in place for years on end, and then they'll go a swing between multi-year. So if we're looking at dry conditions right now in some places, that continue. The cooler temperatures on the periphery season in the more northerly latitudes is going to amplify. You'll see that. And the southern hemisphere seems to be leading the northern hemisphere this grand solar minimum in terms of, if you look down there during the winter time, you can get a glimpse of what the northern hemisphere winter and spring will be like. Now, in terms of magnetism, the volcanism itself is one thing. Yeah, there'll be more earthquakes and landslips talking about this thing, but an outlier not a lot of people are really glimpsing and adding into their risk assessment is volcanic ash. Now, volcanic ash in a regional area, yeah, you might have to leave your home. You couldn't drive your car. But further afield, when you're talking about animal husbandry and you're out letting your goats, chickens, cows, pig, whatever it is, wild forage out there, they're not going to be able to, because the ash will not allow them to eat out into the grass or the silage anymore if it's grown in the fields. So moving forward, you're going to be looking for more eruptions with more ash into the air. That's going to affect that, even fish farming. The gills are going to get stopped up in these fish, like we saw in a couple of real large eruptions down in Peru and Ecuador over the last 4 or 5 years. So coming into this, self-sufficiency and sustainability is one thing to think about. I've eaten vegetables in Costa Rica that had ash on them, and it's just gritty on the teeth. And you go back through a myriad of historical studies, and one of the outliers they do to see how much volcanic activity there was is they look at the teeth decomposition and see how many scratches there were in the teeth of the people that they found in the graves, or when they're going back through the last 8,000 years, finding skeletons, et cetera. They look into the dental records of these people living at the time to see how much grit was in the teeth of the food they were consuming, because there was more volcanic ash in the air. So now we're thinking about this feedback loop of more volcanic activity, and how will that affect you and I trying to have our own lives off the main system with our own animals out here. But what happens if they're not able to eat because the volcanic ash is in their food supply, and yours too? And you can bring that out into the whole mechanized system of global agriculture, agribusiness. What about the silage for the cattle? What about the silage and it'll run through the entire food ecosystem with this ash problem. And not a lot of people are talking about protecting their food. Are you going to put everything in a greenhouse? I mean, you know how difficult that is. Vertical agriculture, how are you going to grow everything if you lose power and you don't have heat in the middle of winter to heat your greenhouse? There's just an enormous amount of things to think about with just this one variable, ash in the atmosphere, that's going to make food unconsumable for animal or people. And I'll stop there.
And historically, I think we've seen some quote unquote pandemics, global pandemics related to the ash and related to volcanic activity. So in terms of historical records and stuff. So that's a fascinating thing. Where in your mind do you think some of this activity would be? Do you have any actual geographic pinpoint in terms of where you think we might see some of this?
Cascadia, for sure. All the way down to California. 2024 or earlier. These are known hotspots that go off every grand solar minimum on the 400-year cycle. So there's a lot of charts, and the best thing to do, if anybody's saying, well, how do you find all this information? Man, what do you do? Well, yeah, I do a lot of research, and I make a lot of phone calls, and I listen to other information too. But if you go to a PDF search engine, because if you go to the net today and you're in your, even Brave or DuckDuckGo, when you go in there and you try to search for some information on the regular internet, you're just inundated with overflow of garbage and things with a little bit of snippet of fact. You want to go to a PDF search engine, then put your key terms in there, because all that does is bring you PDFs from, resources and universities, et cetera. And they're all usually peer reviewed, most of them. There's a few independents that are plugged in there, but almost all of that. And once you start finding your first key term, and you open up a document and you get some keywords there, then you can plug those in to get better results. And eventually you can really wire down some very specifics of precipitation and stalactite cores from this area and these specific years. And then you can just go place by place across the planet and look for specifics, precipitation, drought, population migration, societal collapse, ruins, and different leftover bits of civilization that have disappeared that are rediscovered in archaeological digs, and you can quantify that. But then at the same time, you can definitely take a look at the ash cores that when they're drilling in lake core, drilling sediments, or if you get somewhere further north or there's somewhere there's ice, they can really get some good indication of how much ash was around in different latitudes based on the ice cores. And you start to map it out where these volcanoes have gone off time and time and time again, and you put them into a timeline, and then you see, oh, every 400 years, this seems to go off at the same time that the sun steps down.
Yeah, this seems to connect with a lot of reset theories too, that go to the Tartarian stuff and the mud flood and all this. And it really, I think, points a lot to the sun activity. And I think people need to look more to that, because maybe we're missing something there. But in terms of the greenhouse idea too, in terms of heating and stuff, I mean, the geothermal regulated kind of sunken greenhouse idea is a pretty good one, because you're using just the natural heat of the earth with long pipes, and something that I know Bear and I have talked about putting at the Alfa Vedic gardens and at my house as well. So there are some really inventive, old school, just very simple ways to go about getting your food more secure that doesn't rely on burning fossil fuels or solar panels and stuff like that, using mirrors, being in a place where you're getting enough sun. Now, of course, if you have ash and a layer over that's blocking the sun, I mean, that's getting tough. You're going to have to start growing stuff that doesn't need as much sun. So this is when I get spiritual, David. It's like, and this is why I like the Oregon Wilhelm Reich stuff, because it's like, maybe we can counter this, and this gets into like what really is the sun and how our spiritual powers interplay with the electrical systems, so that we can create a better form of protection that's beyond just mainstream kind of materialistic science. I don't know. It gets trippy, but kind of when you're looking at global volcanic ash covering the world, it starts to go there. It's like, what else can we look towards, in terms of solutions?
It'll be regional first. It won't be the full globe, and you gave me that picture of like a complete ash layer where sun's so dim, you can barely see through it. But with the Reich devices, with the copper piping sticking up, I'm wondering if you could aim that up and like clear a part of the sky out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the earth pipes and stuff. I mean, we've been pounding those in the ground here and at the farm and stuff, and I'm already seeing effects of that. We saw some really cool angelic swirls of chemtrails that were coming over that got pushed out. So it's fascinating, and I think we need to start pushing, as Bear talks about all the time, pushing the boundaries of taking alchemy and taking Reichian and Tesla type technologies and exploring them more, because I think we can go places that could help be massive for solutions for the climate.
Yeah, there's no political solution as far as I'm concerned. There's no present technological solution. We do have the ability to bring technology to the level where it will give us the solution for everything we're talking about. But what I wanted to ask you, David, since you mentioned the three things, that kind of coincide with these events, these natural cyclic events, what did you say? Migration, population reduction, civil unrest, I think. It seems like the powers that be are really trying to prevent some of that from happening and keeping people within danger zones there. So how do you see that one playing out?
I term it as the fingerprints of the grand solar minimum. The population migration, where obviously people are going to move if there's no economy and cooler weather, and predominantly in history, people grew their own food or regionally, and that's all there was. If you couldn't grow, you packed up the wagon or ox cart and you moved to a different location. So in Finland and Nordic countries, after the Maunder minimum, people had emptied that area out. And it used to be a thriving culture. Boats could come in, but there was so much sea ice pack up there, they couldn't ever resupply themselves. So the Nordic countries had emptied out in, say, 1650, 1660. Populations had left, and they were like 10% population of the original. So and people started to re-arrive back in 1720 when the ships could come back in, and those towns had emptied out 90% or so. There was a bare minimum population. And you start to look now, what numbers do we need to keep a bare minimum of our civilization functional? But you see a lot of these things happening where people go, no doobity-doop in my body, so I'm not going to go back to work. But they're already starting to see massive effects of things breaking and not functioning correctly because there's not even a minimum amount of staff to keep things at barely functional level. When you go below that across all industries, then what happens? So you got to look at bare minimum numbers to keep a society functional. So the population migration is going to be one thing. Now, the economic downturn, reset, collapse, whatever you like to term it, is what's value based on? What's value asset going to be? What was it? Well, it was fiat currency. Fiat was based on what? Well, the productivity of a country. And then if you boil it down, the productivity of a nation is its food supply and the production of food. Those available calories can allow other peoples to do extra tasks, which then in turn create something, make something, create a service, and then that's valued. You don't have any food. You got people laying on the floor malnourished. You're not creating anything of value. So fiat in itself is going to have to be revalued, which makes sense when cryptocurrency comes. A reset of sorts, baskets of currency, including gold, crypto. Of course, it's going to be the central bank digital currencies. It won't be anything native like you all are creating or what's out there in the ecosystem now either. No control in that. They're only going to, put baskets of currencies, gold, and things that are under control again with central bank digital issuance. But then also you have this thing, the government overthrows and the political discontent that arrives when people are hungry, they got no jobs, their economies collapse. Then what? Well, they want change in government. But this time it doesn't seem like you can air your anger, your regress, or whatever you like to call it, out to the populace or to the governments anymore. You're all locked down. Nobody can go and do anything to say, hey, we need change. So it does seem that they're trying to front run this whole thing based on past cycles. Mm-hmm. Chinese have tried it, but their food has collapsed. They're absolutely going into a famine in China if they don't get food this year. They're down to the clean your plate campaign. You got to lick every last little piece of grass off your plate. And the kids, because they're not getting as much meat as they used to, the newer generations calling it chewing grass. So
yes,
they're trying to promote vegetarian meals and not so much protein and sort of thing over there, because they don't have they've lost their poultry and the pork production pretty much. Every warehouse that was in the flood zones is nothing left. Crops are at 50%, as well as last year, they were 50%. So they're going to go on a massive buying campaign to bring food in the country, and they're already at bare rations anyway. And you got all these power supply disruptions. And in my opinion, if they are stopping soybean press operations over there, which means, you import soybeans from country, whatever, Brazil, United States, you bring in the soybeans and you crush them for oil so people can cook. They have ceased those operations in China. So for me, that's a huge red flag that they're saying, oh yeah, we're stopping some sort of economic, use of power to produce your touch glass for your Apple iPads and thing. Okay, I could believe that. But when it comes down to where they're stopping soy crush over there, that's 50x above on the problem that they're telling publicly, because you don't stop the food production of oil for people to cook in the country and shut those facilities down unless there is such the gigantic power lack and problem over there. So China tried to front run this. They have the best information on the whole planet about during these grand solar minimums, when things collapse. They have 4,000 years of data. They went through 10 of these cycles already. And another fact for anybody who might not believe this, no Chinese dynasty has ever lasted longer than 400 years, ever, because they're on the 400-year collapse cycle right along with the grand solar minimum. And she understood it this time, and he was trying to be the only person of power to try to override these cycles naturally, but the population was too large. Food production was in polluted, centralized areas. The dams didn't work. They overflowed. They had to release all the water or flood major city centers, and the countryside was sacrificed. But wait a second, you sacrificed the countryside, but that's where you grow all your food so you could keep people's with the connected CCP and Communist Party ties from getting their car flooded, but you destroyed your food supply. Things have gone completely awry over there. So I don't think they're going to survive this grand solar minimum. I think we're looking for another collapse over there too.
And of course, that was
a long-winded answer, Bear. I'm sorry. I should have.
No, that's okay.
ABC finished.
And we also see them, trying to take over areas in Northern Africa and all over the planet, in order to meet their needs. And of course, that's the real dangerous thing, because when civilizations are in the midst of collapse, then that's usually when they go to war as a last resort. And we're already seeing perhaps some pretenses of that right now. So, in the area where we live, we're pretty rural, and the closest town is a long ways away, but a lot of the people from the Bay Area, which is about 10 hours south of here, and actually all over, moving to this part of the state. And of course, these are the people that have the means to do that. They're in bidding wars with houses, up in this area and everything, and paying over the asking price just to get the heck out of the city or wherever they're at. The problem that, a lot of us see that are here is that these people, maybe even some of them are preppers, but I don't think prepping is the answer either these days. I think it's a good idea to have food storage and everything for sure. but it's beyond prepping. You really need a new mindset. You need a new skill set for sure. And these folks that are all moving to places, like where you live, a lot of people are moving to Tennessee. A lot of people, where to, and mostly rural areas. Is that correct? Yeah, like to Florida, Tennessee, Texas, perhaps. And, they're just importing their same mindset and expecting the grocery stores to be open. So those of us that are here and have even been talking about this for a long time and that are prepared, not just with food storage, but, other self-sufficiency measures, that we put in place a long time ago, the quandary I think we're going to find ourselves in is people showing up on our doorstep that are hungry. And, of course, you want to help out whenever you can, but I think some of the people showing up may not be that pleasant and may just, want to take what you have. So, throw that into the mix as well. Do you see similar things happening in rural Tennessee where you're at there with different folks moving in?
Absolutely. And the bidding wars here, I have one of my neighbors is a realtor. I was talking to him, and he heads up all the rural land purchase for part of their company here in East Tennessee. It's nothing commercial, nothing suburbia. It's all just pure rural or forest land that they do, ag land. He was saying that they had a record new price of $120,000 over ask. $120,000 over the asking price. That was a new record set in their company. Never heard. He's like, no, this is so impossible. Probably higher where you are, because 120K here. And people in California are cashing out in cash, rocking up here, buying a 50, 100-acre farm cash. The prices in California are absurd, and New York and Vermont, absurd. So when they come down to places like Tennessee, where it's incredibly reasonable for land, they're paying cash for everything, outbidding. I don't care. I still have an extra $500,000, still extra $2 million, whatever. I'll just pay whatever. Okay, 100,000, 203. Okay, I'm going to outbid you 400. Okay, I want it. It's the only thing that's going to assure my survival. But, I'm not too far from an Amish farm, and I just bought my first live weight sheep. It was a lamb, 105 pounds. First time they slaughtered it. First time for me to butcher it. So that in itself is, butchering, 100-pound animal after we removed the head. We kept all the innards because there's a lot of great stuff in there with the stomach and the heart and the liver and everything to cook up. But to be able to prepare that and then put it away is one thing. But the Amish were telling me that they lost 3 of their lambs to coyotes this year. Now you got to realize these are Amish. They live out there. They got massive dogs of different breeds that are meant to guard those sheep at night, and they still lost 3. And they're experts at their craft. That's all they do all the time for generations is grow and animal husbandry. And they are still losing, herd to pests, coyotes. And then this year, the Japanese beetles were out of control. It's difficult to control them. It seems the insect world has also learned or awakened to the fact that this winter or this year coming up, it's going to be a scrimpy year for food because they were voracious. The wood bees as well. These bees that bore into the wood were unstoppable monsters this year. And everybody was complaining like the wood bees were off the hook this year. So nature has been triggered about, 6 months to a year in advance. So the animal kingdom is already getting ready for whatever harshness is coming at us. If the Amish can't keep their animals safe, what do you think the average person for the first year on the farm, I'm going to put up a fence and I'm going to have a bunch of goats out there. How do you think they're going to fare? They're going to lose all their animals, whether they're stolen or whether they're taken by wild predators. And animal theft is becoming a thing out here. Cows are disappearing out of fields. Horse disappeared over here. Things are just disappearing off people's farms out in Tennessee. People are coming in at night and literally stealing their animals. And, the reports of, things getting picked off trees here and just things disappearing out of gardens. There's pumpkins. Oh, you go and there's somebody picked 30 pumpkins out of another neighbor's garden over on the other side of the hill over there. Things just disappearing, people coming through on the roads and just stopping as opportunists. Okay, that's for now. But when it does come down to it, what do you really do? I mean, I had a discussion just yesterday with an old Army guy who lives a few miles from me here in Tennessee. And he was saying, see what kind of skill set they have, what asset they can provide if they're going to come in with a community to build it out. What assets or what skill set do they have to help add to the community? But then you're right. What happens when you come and they don't want anything to do with what except you have inside, and they're going to come and take it. I mean, I don't know how far we can take it on here without being going off the Richter with the sensors or demonic or whatever happens here. But, there's some real issues to be thought about in terms of security around the place. And how far are you going to take it? How far are you going to take it? Because they are not going to stop until they get what is ever in your place. And that includes people. So are you're really going to have to make some seriously on the second spot choices here.
Well,
when you discharge those rounds, that is, you entered in a completely different world at that point.
I think
completely different.
Yeah. I think one great solution to this, and we're seeing it into some respects here. We had a slew of thefts here in the summer.
Oh, you did too. Yeah, happening here.
And actually it was automobiles being stolen and things that were really doesn't happen here. So what did they do? What happened here? The community galvanized, came together, came up with solutions, community watch. And I think one thing that's important to stress here is the power of community. And the idea of being a lone wolf is not viable. Mm-mm. And so that whole concept of being the lone wolf, gunman, on survival prepper, that has to go out your consciousness right away. It's going to be, I think, a combination of decentralization with the ability to barter and have your own means of doing commerce, right? And that can be in pockets throughout the whole world by using digital, but then two, having communities. And I think that has to relate to this new age of the Aquarian mindset. I think we're going to go back to micro communities because the crystallization that came through centralization, that's all fracturing. The one world system that we're already seeing dying. Globalism is dead. The supply chains, everything is gone out the window. The just-in-time system, that's all fracturing and dying and right in front of us. So I think having this sensibility where you need to get to a place where you can have community have your back. And that's what we really promote here with Alfa Vedic. And we're seeing, while Bear is mentioning, we do have some of that Silicon Valley type coming in, buying stuff sight unseen. We also have a huge bit of our community moving up here. And what we really like is the idea of being sovereign on your own land in a community where sovereigns connect. And so it's like, hey, what are you really good at doing? Well, I'm really good at growing hemp. And hemp, I think, is a great, by the way, you're talking about soy and stuff. And Lee in here was mentioning, because he's in Asia, how hemp has become a great solution for the soy. But having that ability to be like, okay, you focus on that. We're going to focus on this. We'll work together and we'll have our confederation here in our locality in the United States. That's why Bear and I like to focus on counties versus states, because you have a sheriff. And if you're in a place that has a sheriff that has your back, you have now a much more stratified defense mechanism than looking at it in a broader state. But that being said, we're also more fan of having your own sovereign land than like the commune idea, because I've seen the commune idea fracture and be weird, and people get upset and disoriented from you're not doing enough. So we did a 3-part series, David, on land patents, because that's like an extremely important aspect moving forward, having the sovereignty on your land to protect from seizure and capture, because as the Agenda 2030 to the Adapt 2030, but the Agenda 2030 plan, which is they know this is coming. So they're trying to get everyone in these cities, right, to get everybody into a centralized system where they can force you to eat bugs and all that. The counter to that is by being decentralized, but also being in communities that are rural and that are robust in our sovereignty. By the way, when you were talking about food and all that, in terms of the bugs and that, you know what the number one thing in Silicon Valley is now? The number one like development with companies is food, is synthetic food creation. That is like the number one thing that Silicon Valley is focused on right now. So that'll tell you something. But that's how Alfa Vedic is going about it. Are you seeing that in your neck of the woods? I mean, you're obviously connecting with neighbors. Are you having, that seems like a positive thing that's happening as people are coming together in these places and working with each other on solutions in that idea.
Yeah. And the synthetic food, don't they have to have a base input of ingredient in the beginning to even construct those foods? And where's that going to come from?
Yeah, exactly. So that's what gets creepy, right? It's like, what are they doing in those labs? There, a lot of it are carbon based. Where are they getting that carbon from, or where are they getting, the core constituents of that food? That's a great point. Are we looking at potentially like a sci-fi film, like
I hope not.
what was it called? Green,
Soylent Green.
Soylent Green. I mean, what it comes down to once again is getting as sovereign as you can in your food production, in your ability to control your land from centralized forces, and then getting activated in your community. We had, we've been involved somewhat with the Bears with Owen Benjamin because whether you agree with all of what he says, he's a funny guy. I love him to death, but he has galvanized a global community around this concept, right? Of becoming more and more sovereign with your food production, embracing older, tried and true technologies that don't rely upon a centralized system or centralized technologies or the grid. And while I am not a Luddite, and I believe in the ability for technologies as a tool to help us, I also very much appreciate tried and true stuff. Like my wife just got back from visiting family in Santa Barbara and brought back an 1889 food mill from her great-great-grandmother. And I'm telling you, Bear, this thing's like 100 pounds. I mean, they just don't make stuff like this anymore. So being able to embrace those old technologies is extremely important as well. And we just need to be with it. We need to help each other out and really get as sovereign as we can be.
Yeah, well, I will tell you one of the ins here, at least I joined the Beekeepers Association. And, people who are keeping bees, and plus I got 3 hives out here. And then the person who's mentoring me also has 5 hives out here because I have a pretty 23 acres in the back. So getting into a local community that's already involved in some sort of animal husbandry, beekeeping, or gardening itself. And then there's a lot of, 3% groups that are around here, especially with the EMT training and sort of thing like that. So there's many ways to put your fingers into where you want to be and meet some of the right people. Now, my next step is trying to find people who can come out here every single month, teach me about wild foraging as we walk around and make a food map of the land month by month, season by season. That way we know we have a full working supermarket up here in the forest that we can walk around. But to find these types of people, I'm having difficulty. People who really know the true knowledge of wild foraging that can almost identify everything that's in this area, and then spend the time to roll around with your bumbling, what's this, what's that? Can we make it in? Can you eat this? Can you make it into medicine? And a million questions after every plant species identified. Those are a little more difficult, harder to come by than,
now's the time to go ahead, Bear. I was going to say, now's the time to engage with the elders. Find your elders and get with them and implore them to help educate those coming in. And speaking of elders, someone I highly respect, Bear Lando, you have the floor.
Ooh, elder.
Okay. Use a youngster.
So, I hear you, David. In this area, we have a very large Native American population. And we're actually been teaching classes, gardening classes, and you name it. And, a good number of them have been coming to our get-togethers. And much to our dismay, as we've tried to pick their brains as far as, they're indigenous and generational in this area, they've lost sight completely, for the most part, of just wildcrafting or what the heck, is growing under their ancestral land in the first place. So it's been an interesting phenomena because in some ways we've actually been playing a role of teaching some of these folks that we were hoping to learn from. And, especially going out in the forest and wildland areas and identifying native species and that sort of thing. So, it's interesting. And I think it might be part of that old Hopi philosophy too, where they say their children, ancestors would return, and be members of the different racial groups that would later inhabit the areas. And I think we're kind of seeing a cyclic changes too, as far as people embodying, with different past experiences and things. And also the people that you would assume know the most actually know the least. not to take anything away from anybody, but it's hard to find mentors. And that's one thing that we are doing, is holding workshops and things here, from everything from cultivating mushrooms to, just gardening and so forth. Now, I wanted to mention one other thing. We talk about supply chain shortage. Right now, we are already making large purchases for our fertilizer needs for next growing season. Every year we've been on this land, we've grown, more and more topsoil that is viable. So we have to do less and less, but still we want to open up other areas, and it takes a little bit of priming with certain fertilizers and things to get the whole thing going. And I think one thing that a lot of the newcomers aren't realizing is they might not even be able to buy fertilizer for their tomatoes in their little raised beds when they move up here.
What kind of price increase are you seeing then across the board for fertilizers now that you're purchasing?
I would estimate, and we purchase regularly, I would estimate about in the last 10 years, we've seen them go up about 40%.
Yeah, because the ammonia factories are shutting down, and a lot of natural gas shortages here, there, and everywhere. And the fertilizer factories themselves, the ammonia factory, are just shutting down completely. So you have to ask yourself, how long would it be, A, to restaff it, and then get that thing up running from zero to bringing the trucks back in and getting whatever they need as base to manufacture. And then they're going to need the packaging for that and the supply chains of this and coming in and out. And a lot of truck drivers are just saying, no jabba jabba do in my body either. So then there's less truck drivers. And where does it begin once it stops? The whole thing of it stopping and going idle should send shivers down your spine. It should. But then the next thing, how does it restart? Or doesn't it? And if you don't have fertilizers, you have to think about it. This is another aspect of coming into next year. If we're seeing it on the individual level of not enough fertilizer, then on the commercial level, what happens if they can't get their full supply of potash and other fertilizers they're used to? I use 1010 sometimes, 1919. I use a different variety of organics and the kelp and the mycorrhiza and a different array of things that's, it's not on the store shelf like it used to be either. But when it comes to the commercial level, what are the yields going to be if they're not able to get full access to fertilizers as is depended on to get these super high yields of 170 bushels per acre on corn? What happens if they're only running at 50% fertilizer supply through the whole ag business or ag arena next year? Our yields literally would be cut in half or probably more. Because you're looking at oats this year, there's almost no oat out there. The oats across the planet was a near loss this year. And the wheat in America is down to 1960s harvest level, and there are going to be durum wheat shortages for sure. They're already talking about, will you even have some certain types of pastas coming up at the end of the year? So if we're seeing it already at this beginning juncture of this grand solar minimum onsetting, the economy around this whole supply chain thing starting to shatter. But the things that you need to grow food inside that supply chain are also starting to disappear, shrink, dwindle, whatever words you want to use for that. So how is that going to affect the amount of food growing? And then we get back into that feedback loop again of, wait, government's trying to control the downfall because there's too many people that they can't provide food for, but then you just got another leg of that knocked out because there won't be enough fertilizer to boost production for more yield, which means less food and still more mouths to feed. And then the government's still stuck in the same position, but double heavy because you just knocked your production in half. So I don't have the answers. I'm just saying this is what's truly in earnest on the ground right now is something to think about for the year inbound.
And not to be a dick, but I mean, I think America could do with a little less gluten and grain. So I mean, this is all wheat like
belly, baby.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I was joking around in the chat too. It's like, man, Wim Hof's going to be bigger than ever. I mean, like, let's embrace the cold. There's a lot of health. We talked about this on the first time you were here. Like, while we've seen general trends where when we have minimums, we have more quote unquote disease and death in terms of that. But if we're knowledgeable and we understand how we can use the cold, and we've done shows on this, like I do ice baths. I actually go in the river now because our river's so damn cold. It's amazing. 3 minutes with some breath work in the river, in the cold, embrace the cold. And, we're built for this. Our bodies have the epigenetic memory of knowing how to survive and thrive with this. Well, we'll lose the white adipose fat. We'll regain the gray adipose fat by going into these processes. So Wim Hof, man, he's going to be more popular than ever with this coming mini ice age, Bear.
Yeah, ice baths. I agree with everything you're saying. Ice baths they may lose popularity when people are hungry, though. So,
but the thing is, the point is, people don't need to be hungry if you get more sovereign and you understand how to grow your own food and get off being with, just used to the traditional means of going to the grocery store and eating the crappy GMO pesticide ridden food anyways, that's killing you as it is. So, I mean, there's always a massive upside to these cycles. And I think we're going back to the consciousness side of things. The earth is working with our consciousness to help us get to the next level where we all need to get as a collective whole so that we can get out of this gross, dense plane of existence that we've been mired in for thousands of years of war and death and misery and slavery. So maybe the earth, maybe Mother Gaia, maybe Sophia has given us a little kick in the ass. Sorry. Anyways.
Bear, I know you're going to follow up with a comment on that. I'm just going to.
Well, I wanted to hear more from you, and just back on the fertilizer and everything. We do rely on our animals. I got a bunch of chickens out there. We use the chicken poop and everything, but you still got to feed the animals. Now we have solutions, and we'll be able to ride this out. A lot of us will be, but most people won't. And I go back to the original question I had to you, David, which is my biggest quandary. I don't so much worry about the marauders that show up with bad intentions, on our land. I worry more about the hungry family that looks at you with, genuine needs and just saying, hey, my kids are hungry. Can you help me out? And part of me says, well, shoot, we were trying to tell you 40 years ago that this thing was, in the works and coming. You didn't listen. And now you want my stuff. But then at the same time, they appeal to your humanity. That's going to be a tough one.
Yeah. Amish had the same exact conversation with when we were slaughtering the lamb, and then, they wanted to do something with the pelt. So while we were, getting the pelt off there and taking the organs out and putting them in a bucket and thing, he was saying the same thing. The Amish really understand that when this thing goes down, thousands and thousands of people are going to come rushing out to their farm. They're on 500 acres, not too far from here. But the average city person knows countryside's safe, all the food's out there. But then the average person knows way more. David's little tiny 20-acre farm over there probably doesn't have nearly as much food as the Amish do down there, because the Amish, they grow food. They have 500 acres. They must have enough for everybody. We'll just go and buy it. And the Amish guys I was talking to were like, nope, we're going to just close up shop. We're going to drop a log out the front gate. We know they're going to walk over that. And the best we can do is, like the Bible says, help your brethren in need, and that shall come back to you. And they're going to live by that principle of those in need, they're going to help, because they do believe that giving that sustenance and that life-giving force is going to come back to them in many different ways. Instead of, like you say, that lone gunman on a hill going, no, you're not taking any of my stuff. I need my other can of peas that I saved from 1957. That's not going to work. But they have it already under, and I had an interesting discussion with about cryptocurrency with the Amish over there, because they're very aware of what's going on. Don't delude yourself that they don't have access to any electrical devices and they live like they. No, they're very super intelligent and understand what's going on, and they need to understand it to survive and continue the world that they have. And they understood cryptocurrency as being a direct threat to anything cash-based that they operate in. So they're trying to figure it out in these next couple of years. What happens when crypto dominates and we do go away to a cashless culture? How are they still going to exist on a cash basis only culture? And I said, hey, I got a few rounds of silver. I'll be happy to trade you some silver for your food. But they say, yeah, you're one guy, you got a little silver. But what about everybody else who's going to come in? Hey, you take my apple, you take, no. So they're thinking about bartering, and they already realize that most people are coming to consume their goods won't have any barterables or tradables, but they're in a conundrum too. But going back to that whole thing, what's going to happen with the families at the front door? I'm going to have to ask myself the same thing, is I just don't know. You can expect it. That's the whole thing. Expect it to happen. It's not going to happen. It is going to happen. If you're living in the countryside, at some point in the next year, somebody is going to come knocking on your door hungry. And, I pushed that timeline to say a year, because a lot of things are starting to fail now, and the failures they're speeding up on the second failure. So the first failure might've taken 6 months, but the second set of failures has taken 2 months. And the third set of knock-on effects is going to take a month. And then we start to get into this then it'll be 2 weeks, then it'll be a week, and then it'll be happening every day, where there'll just be complete breakdown. And, we're starting to see it everywhere, from not enough workforce out there to keep bare minimum going. And I'm wondering what's going to happen, excuse me, with the grain shipments, because grain on rail is the most stable amount of business for any grain or rail shipper anywhere. It's always grain. So what happens if, excuse me, if they have to get jabba-dabba-dooed because it's a government contract like BSNF, they got a government contract. None of those guys want that thing. Then what? Even your deliveries stop. People are going to come knocking. Cities are not going to be filled again.
Yeah. And once again, I think the solution is community, and this does get very spiritual, right? And in terms of, and I wasn't trying to just be a hard ass with that. I think it's trying to be basically letting people know, like, and this is what we do on our platform. And this is why we do a festival about solutions, is like waking people up in the cities to understand it's like, it's time to get sovereign. It's time to start seeing this. But when they do come, if you have a community that is growing in abundance, to support those people and bring them in if you can. Now, if you've got roving gangs coming in and it's turning into something that's very, dangerous, you got to start wondering what's obviously the corporate governments are projecting this stuff out. So they have things in place too. So you got to wonder what are they going to allow to happen? What's going to be working there? The military going to come in? So there's a lot of different things at play. So I don't know. I think a great strategy is, once again, just get crystallized with your community and understand that we're in very spiritual times. And I do agree, yeah, with the Amish there. It's like, you're going to be better by growing more and trying to support those people than trying to battle them. But also it does make sense, like where our farm is, where you can kind of shut off from the world and make it very difficult for people to get to you. Be in places where it's pretty rough. Like there's only one highway to really get to our town. And then it's just a bunch of backwoods, Forest Service roads. And we've talked in our town about what we do with that, blowing the highway. But still doesn't mean people aren't going to get here. So yeah, I mean, these are all really, really tough questions to answer, David. I agree.
What about the tax man? Either the property tax itself in the county, or if you owe income tax and they put a lien on your property, and then at some point they'll be like, all right, if you owe over this much on a lien, we're confiscating everything because we're going into a hyperinflationary event. So Bear, I don't know if you have any, advice on that, especially when, coming into property taxes and not being able to pay that, on the legality of them being able to confiscate land, or on the income tax end of things where you owe, and then they could use that as some sort of like pinch point on you out there.
Well, that's yeah, we've done a number of shows on that, and beyond just doing shows, I've actually done a lot of these processes over the years, and I hang within circles where people do that. So when you get into land patents, of course, you revert back to your original title, and rather than a deed where you just have equitable interest, the title now goes back to that, original ownership, property ownership. And that's what's been taken away from us. And when you're just deeded your property, like a warranty deed, typically, you are contracted to pay property taxes. So as soon as you do a quit claim and revert back to the original title, the land patent, then you're off the books as far as property taxes. Also with income tax, as you're aware, that's highly unconstitutional. Not one penny of the income tax goes to paying for anything within our country or infrastructure. It goes directly to Puerto Rico. Every single dime and then, into the IMF. So we see none of that money. And so when you learn those facts, you say, well, why on earth would we be paying that in the first place? So in order to not be held accountable for trafficking in slaves, the original framers of the Internal Revenue Service have loopholes that allow you to get out. One of them is a code that's now discovered. It's called the revocation of election to pay. If you've ever paid or filed a 1040, you can revoke that contract and then get off of the books. Many of us have done things like that too. So it goes back into the same level of awareness that it takes, learning how to grow food and make your own way. You also have to learn how to get the predators out of your life and realize that they have certain codes they have to follow. And when you learn those codes and the loopholes that are purposely there for you, if you want to exit their system, that, you have to do a little bit of elbow grease and learning. And just like you do some research and change things, because we don't have to be beholden to any of that. No way.
How much pushback did you receive when you filed those forms with the IRS for the 1040?
The recent ones that I'm talking about, no pushback at all. Now, in earlier years, when we had just little pieces of the puzzle, I didn't just get pushback. I got arrows in my back and got targeted pretty heavily. But, that's the way we learned. And in prior times, we were willing to do that just to discover, okay, how the heck are they pulling this off in the first place? So we learned the hard way. Some of us are still here to talk about, some not. But there are solutions for that too.
Yeah, beautiful.
And then, of course, it all goes back to the conviction, if you want to bring this to a more spiritual level, that we are sovereign. Nobody on this plane has any authority over us. That is, worshiping in false idols, whatever you want to call it. It doesn't matter. And you just have to build that internal will force and just stick by your guns. This is not a time or a place historically to be a pussy. It's really not.
And the beautiful thing is it's all about consensus. And we are in a time where, thanks to the internet, what Bear's talking about when he was doing this on the early pioneers of the lawful remedy, very few people knew about it. So he was really putting his neck out on the line. And now, thanks to the internet, we have massive movement of people applying lawful remedy and all sorts of courses and different workshops and people understanding the difference between lawful versus legal. And Craig's in the chat, your buddy Craig, who we love. And he's talking about, back during the times of Stalin taxing, 110% of the grain to the farmers, and those that couldn't pay sent them to the gulag. And that's frightening, but they didn't have the internet and they didn't have ability for people to connect and find consensus. And they also didn't have the structure of the republic and everything. But that being said, we have lawful remedy that if enough people wake up fast enough, which I personally see happening, we can defend our sovereignty. And once again, I know I keep saying this, it's all about sovereignty, and it's all about people getting out of the clouds of the corporatism and watching Netflix and feeling like they're a victim and getting charge of their life and becoming sovereign. And that's the solution. I think that's the most important people need to take away today.
And one thing I might add is the reason I was asking these questions is when we come to this economic breakdown that has occurred through every grand solar minimum, your ability to have a way to pay even just these taxes I'm talking about is going to be removed from almost everybody. I mean, sure, you could walk in with a couple ounces of silver and pay your taxes, but look out on the general landscape. How many people are even holding physical silver in their own possession right now? Less than 5%. So right there, 95% of the people lose their land, 95% of the people lose their farms or whatever it is. So the ability for the system to continue to function with the fiat, with the electronic, online banking, with your ATMs, your credit cards, that's all going to go bye-bye. And when the fiat system's restructured 10 to 1, restructured 100 to 1, we're not really sure what it's going to be, but you're going to be reissued something, the frozen accounts, and then suddenly you wake up and then the issuance. So if I had $1,000 in my account, I might wake up with $10 new, or I might wake up with $100 new. But those property taxes are going to stay the same in the new dollar system. And those IRS debts are going to be brought over in the new dollar system after you've been reset 10 to 1 or 100 to 1. So, you take all this time and energy to set up what you have on your homesteads, and then for an entity to be able to come in and rip that out from under you because you don't have a handful of silver. That is the direction it looks like it's going, because, Agenda 2030, they want everybody out of the countryside. So you got to look at what are some of the ways that they might facilitate that. Well, even if you have your land completely paid for, then you're stuck with the property taxes. And then, IRS doing their thing. Oh, we got to lien on this. We're going to confiscate this, going to sell it from under you. So the energy put forth, and you can already see the plan to rip that away from almost everybody. They had to broadcast the plans. Adapt 2030 is about revamping our food growing strategies before 2030 so we can feed the planet. Agenda 2030 is to get you off the land, put you into a city, jabba do, throw a phone in your hand, track and trace you, distribute the calories to keep you just barely alive and functional enough to go to do your job to make money for the state in any non-compliance, and you'll end up as Soylent Green. That's where it's going. But I'm just wondering from here to there, how they're going to get these farmers out here off their land that already own it for like umpteen generations. And we see all these new tax laws that you can't pass down farmland, or you get $1 million, whoop-de-doo, down to the next generation. But when you're looking at farms that average 350 acres out in somewhere like Kansas at $8,000 to $10,000 an acre, you're $2 million in the red, and they want 40% of that as a capital gains tax, even though it's your family passing you down this land. And then if you want to sell a portion of the land to pay the property tax or to pay the capital gains tax, then you're going to get a capital gains tax on the property you sold to pay the capital gain tax on the property that you're bequeathed. So then you're getting this downward spiral. So what are you going to do? Keep 50 acres of the 250 acres that your family owned for 200 years? And that's the way they're trying to do it in another legal sense. Thanks, Biden, for doing that. But that's the way it's coming down now. You get $1 million. And with all this hyperinflation, it could be $1 million is going to be 1 acre in the future. The plans are nefarious. And the way that money printing is going, the devaluation of the dollar is putting absurd amounts on all of the valuations of assets, including property. So when it comes down to capital gains, you're going to be hit with some staggering numbers of amounts of money that are owed to these institutions.
Yeah, and it's unsustainable in both directions. The government will not be able to survive. They just hired 500,000 new IRS agents, and good luck.
See, exactly.
Yeah, they have to eat too. And also, by the way, if you try to pay your taxes in silver, good luck with that. They're going to accept that. And unfortunately, David, for most people, there's just too much of a learning curve on too many levels. We're growing food, dealing with, predator government agencies and all the above. And, because like Mike said, they've been watching Netflix. So unfortunately, there is going to be a lot of collateral damage with what's going on. When I was a kid, we allegedly, as a country, had 20 years of food put aside in silos and everything that would sustain the entire nation's population for that amount of time. And now I've seen that erode during my lifetime to the point where now they're actually paying farmers to burn their food, not to plant things in the first place. So it kind of makes me suspect that even though I'm convinced also that they know exactly what's going on, why on earth would they actually pile on the food shortage and make sure there's none around? Of course, we know the answer to that.
So Barrett, one thing, going back to the land patent thing with the farmers, and I know most aren't going to catch on to this, but if we could just have 3, 4, 5% understand what the power of the land patent is, and that's never been overturned in a court of law, and actually would give you the ability to not even to get out of debt and do all these things, and then embracing technologies to allow you to go straight to consumer, CSAs, things like this, there are a lot of viable options for those farmers who choose to stop watching Netflix and wake up. And the cool thing is, I think a lot of farmers are, And I do agree there's going to be a ton of collateral damage, but there are solutions that are at play here to go to war, really, with the centralized forces. And that's really what we're looking at, right? The problem of centralization, the problem of socialism, the problem of government. We really need to embrace, as Pedro in the chat here, voluntarism, which we're massive supporters of this concept. And but yeah, it's going to be a wild ride, guys, for sure.
And David, you asked the question, how are they going to get these farmers and rural people off their land? Well, here in California, they're getting burnt out, purposely set fires. Tens of thousands of people over the last several years have been misplaced or displaced from their homes and their farms and so forth. We have the standoffs, up here in Southern Oregon, where and also the Bundy Ranch, down in Nevada there, they were victimized by the fact that local politicians or senators, what's his name, Reed, in Nevada, and I forget the name of the guy up here in Oregon, but they're doing business with China, and they've already sold the mineral rights, for the land from underneath the farm. So they figure out trumped up ways to, bring legal charges or something, put them in jail or accuse them of being terrorists and everything. But if you have a land patent, you also own the mineral rights, the water rights, and you have you have not created a surety status for your land against the national debt, which is what property taxes and everything are all about. So you got to lose that warranty deed.
Yeah, and what type of attorney could help you do that? I mean, how many regular attorneys that in your town are versed on such?
Zero.
Yep.
On the other hand, I would advise anybody to watch our 3-part podcast on that, where we had a gentleman who actually, went to law school, but he's in the mining industry. He's done this for years. Just a brilliant gentleman who has done hundreds of these things. And it's not that whether or not they work, it's the way the land distribution was originally established in this country. We're just reverting back to it before the middlemen came in and again, tried to, get us to unwittingly agree to be sureties and pledge everything we have, including our land, against the national debt that they're creating in the first place. So
yeah. I mean, we must remember we have
a lawyer.
We have unalienable rights that all living consciousness has throughout the entire universe. That's what the forefathers had put in the Bill of Rights and the Constitution. It supersedes all legal jurisdiction created by any government, edifice, any court. It's natural law. So that's what sovereignty is. Understanding that you got to do your own homework. We got to stop looking towards these officialdom of trying to help us out. And that's what most people aren't going to get. And that is worrisome. We're going to have massive issues with that. Also,
and I don't have any, sorry, go ahead, Mike.
No, go ahead, Bear.
I was just going to say, I don't have any delusions that they're going to obey their own laws or the Constitution all the time, and that they'll just come kill you anyway, no matter what you do.
Sure.
I've seen that happen too. But on the other hand, there are solutions, and a lot of us have exercised them, and so far they work. And what we've discovered in our processes is that government goes after the lowest hanging fruit, the people that are less educated, more vulnerable, and most afraid. And, maybe our time will come too, but I don't really live with any concerns of that.
Well, and also what they're doing to really get people off the land. What did gruesome Newsom just do? We were talking about earlier this week. They are outlawing small motors in California. January 1st, 2024. You will not be able to use small gas motors off the road. So that means lawnmowers. That means chainsaws, generators, things that every person in the rural, anywhere, even small, lower middle class, lower income folks, gardeners in the city. People, they're pushing this whole electric thing, which is more damaging to the environment than fossil fuels, if you really do the research. So that's interesting, David. I don't know if you saw that little piece of legislation come about this week. Unbelievable.
I did. And that would include water pumps and firefighting gear too, because a lot of that's pulling some heavy volume out of a water source to spray it to another source. I mean, what are they going to do? Say, well, you can't even put out your own fire because now you're under arrest or got charged with a felony because you started up a gasoline-powered water pump to put the fire out in your house because the fire services aren't working because they're all defunded and nobody's going to work anymore, but you can't still put out your own fire. You're under arrest. Now, oh, by the way, we're going to confiscate your land. They're going to write some little rider under there. If you're caught using because it would be like a drug act where if you're caught manufacturing whatever, they'll confiscate the land. Same thing. Well, if you're caught using a gas-powered motor, we're going to confiscate the land too. They're going to put all these riders and clauses inside there on top of what there is out in the public. That I bet there's something buried down on page 700 in that law that says, by the way, if you're caught using this device, we're going to confiscate your property. And speaking of that, on a positive note, I found an Indian marker tree on my property out here. It went up the old highway and it was an old Cherokee trail. Now, the first times I ever saw it, I was like, wow, that tree is really interesting the way it's bent over like that. Never seen a tree like that. Why did it? I wonder if I fell in a storm and it's tried to grow back up straight again. But come to find out, looking at this tree, and I just stumbled into an Indian marker tree video one day and boom, the light bulb came on. Oh my gosh. Okay. And then I started to do a little research, and where the marker tree is, where the old logging road is, that's on my property, was part of the old highway back in the 1910s and 20s, which was a repurposed Cherokee trading trail, because it saves you about a full mile going down to the bottom of the valley and then coming back up the road here. Plus it's up because it floods down there. Sometimes at the bottom, it's a little bit low. So yeah, it was an old Cherokee trail. And what kind of markers are there from our past to still show you water sources and ways to, move faster through your environment? We got to start learning from the past to get through the future, because the collapses seem to be real planned at this moment. I mean, it's very apparent that this is a planned collapse. Nothing's organic. The cycles are known, so they're trying to do the damage control, but the collapse is on purpose to try to ride through and set up another structure on the other way out. But what can we learn from the past to go do a huge U-turn around all their plans that are trying to enslave most people? But again, very few are even aware of what's going on in terms of the surface level of control, let alone understanding solar cycles and riding on top of natural cycles to achieve agendas for, the reset of an economy. You just lose them in deer in the headlights there. And you're talking a very, very, very small percent. But again, you look back at 1770s, it only took, what's that, 3 or 4% of the population to join in to be able to achieve a goal there. So it doesn't require like even 50% of the people. It requires a very small amount to achieve a very large victory.
And again, that can be explained with physics, because, just the power we have to generate those progenitors of all manifestation.
I hear the jets coming by. That's a C-130 coming in doing super low maneuvers at 500 feet through the valley here. They're below our mountain top line here. And recently, I must say they're coming through blazing here at 500 feet doing intermountain low altitude runs. And it's just started probably in the last 2 months. And they're C-130s, full, prop plane. They're not jet engine, they're prop. But usually they'll come blazing through in the evening, so you can't get photos of them. And if they see a fire out in our front field, if we're burning, they'll head off in a different direction. So I'm glad you could pick that up on film. That's how close they're coming, right over the tops of the homes and the farms here in the valley. So something's a little upticked in the last, say, like 2 to 3 months. And they say it's an air station down over the way. And there is an air station down there, but it's many miles from here. But they're doing low altitude runs through the valleys. So what does that tell you they're preparing for? I am curious.
We've noticed that occasionally up here, where there's obvious military aircraft doing maneuvers or whatever overhead. And, we're out in the middle of nowhere here. And it happens more routinely now, for sure. So what mountains are around you where you're at there?
Smoky Mountains, Cherokee National Forest, those sort of mountains here. But if you come out of the Cherokee National Forest, and then you hit some flat areas, and then you get into a secondary smaller mountain range, 1,000, 1,500 feet, and then it kind of tapers off over onto a plateau. So we're in that 1,000 to 1,500 foot mountain range area here in the valleys.
Mm-hmm.
Right around 900 to 1,000 feet in elevation.
plenty of water in the area? Because that's the most key thing. You know, people are saying, well, what should I look for when I relocate? And I always say water.
Well, yeah, on the property, we have 3 streams that flow when it rains. But then down at the pond at the front of us over here, there's different aquifers that are coming out of the pond. And unbeknownst to me, where we're here now was an old Cherokee village back in the 16, 15, 1700s. It's even on some of the old maps. But then the guys during the Civil War used to camp right here at this pond. Because the thing about it, since it was spring fed, anything that was thrown in there would go down the stream and end up in the river a couple miles from here. So if you're looking at stationing troops, you know, like there's all kind of waste and things that'll be tossed out. They had a full working toilet from nature, which would pull out of this big pond and continuously replenish it with fresh water, and then send the waste downstream. And again, I could see why Indigenous would choose this here as a location. They have a lookout point in a couple areas. And again, a spotter, like where are you going to be? We have an area up here where we can see almost 360 degrees, but you can see all the roads coming in over here. You got 3 roads in different variety of areas where you can see all of them from the top up there. So it only take one person to be up there with a radio to be able to say, hey, there's somebody coming in here. And a water source, security, your ability to grow food in winters that aren't that brutally cold, that you could for a couple, 2-3 months, still run some heat in there, and communities, like-minded people. You wouldn't want to drop yourself in the middle of LA, because the people, forget about the city itself, but just the mind frame of people is not there. You know, out here in East Tennessee, it's still, you know, Bible Belt, God-fearing people, a lot of common sense, hardworking people. It's just, there's still a rule of law here based on what people will accept or not accept. If you're doing something nasty out here, they're not even going to wait for the police to come out. They're going to take the law into their own hands and stop you from doing that. You know, the stuff that can be gotten away with in a city, you're not leaving this place here. If you're going to try to do some of those things out here, the people just won't have it. They surely will. It's about their family safety, the safety of the community, and what's truly accepted as morally correct. Like, that's still strong here, super strong. And those are the kind of areas you want to be in, where there's still a moral compass that people abide by, where they will help each other based on what's going on, where they're not going, oh, I don't want to, you know, that somebody will actually stand up with a neighbor and say, whoa, that's got to stop, you know, especially with kids and things like, yeah. So what you look for, the land itself, but then the people around your land's a whole different other thing to, you know, to add into the mix. So you can find one perfect thing with the land, but you might be in a completely dire opposite of how people think. So you're looking for a combination of all of it, I think.
And it all goes back to connecting with people that still have the connection to the land. And unfortunately, urbanized people have lost that. They've lost their common sense, a lot of them, not everybody. And they've actually been weaponized against the rest of us. So agreed. You know, I believe in places like Los Angeles, they'll probably be eating themselves within 10 days, you know, just like in Venezuela, which was a beta test for what's coming here. You know, cannibalism was running rampant just after a couple weeks.
No.
So yeah, you don't want to. Oh, absolutely. They're selling human meat on the open market.
What? I never heard about that.
Yeah, during the height of their, you know, their chaos, when it was peaking, that's what was happening. And historically, that, you know, is not an isolated event. You know, that is pretty common. But going back just to finish up the comments about a small majority of people, or a small number of people necessary to make the change. And I was just remarking that, you know, when you get into the physics of that, you can actually, you know, explain how, you know, that old saying, when 2 or more are gathered in my name, well, that's, you know, what the suggestion was. And when you have groups of people all, you know, looking through a singular lens, the powers of manifestation just increase exponentially. And the other thing is when you are aligned with natural law, and natural law is not words on a piece of paper, it's an actual phenomena. Now you have the entire universe that you're drafting And, then that makes what you're doing even more powerful. So natural law does trump everything. Mother Nature does bat last. And I believe that some of us who are taking our responsibility to be stewards of this land, are, going to be better off than most because we have all of those factors going for us.
Nothing more special than waking up and going up when it's foggy in the morning and just sitting there, knowing that you're not in a park, that nobody's going to come walking up and disturb your silence, and just, visualize what you want to do with this piece over here. I want to trim this. We got to get the blackberry patch better over there. I want to clear out down to the creek so it's just grass there for easier access. You can kind of use your imagination to sculpt the land as you sit there, because, I believe the same thing. I don't own this land. I purchased it to take care of it for the next generation, and then. So I look at it as the visitors in the natural sense on the land, whether they be bipedal or four-legged, whatever they are, they're welcome here. And I will take care and make sure that only we hunt out here in a sustainable manner, where, it might take a deer per season or something, but not outrageously stripping the forests, and trying to live in harmony with it. Even the muscadine vines that were growing here, when we were, clearing a portion of one of the tree lines, I really went out of my way to save the muscadines that were growing wild where they were. And we tried to put them up on trellises to get them to grow, but the berries or the grapes didn't really manifest that much this year. Yeah, sure, they still had leaves and it still ran down the wire and everything, but they didn't produce the grapes like they did when they were in a natural state way higher up in the trees. But to try to bring something out on the wild side and then sculpt it into a, more what we're used to, in a fashion on a wine vine in a farm somewhere, didn't work so well. But you got to experiment to learn what's going to work and what's not. Blueberries did great. All the wild blueberries around the property, trimmed them up last year, did a bunch of fertilizing and all these things, and they take that year off after you prune them. But next year they should be producing an enormous amount of blueberries. So when I find something wild in the forest and it's already chose to grow there, and there's 7 or 8 wild blueberry plants around there, trees, I'll sculpt around that and give them even more space to expand, more sunlight, and then, do the proper fertilization for them. But the muscadines really didn't work that well this year for some reason. But, it's my first try to bring a wild wine vine out and put it on a trellis.
It takes a while to really learn a piece of land. We've been on this present farm for a good number of years now, and every year we learn new things. Every little space on the property, 1 acre over here, it has entirely different attributes. So, just for folks that, are planning on maybe moving to the country and growing their own food, there's a lot to it. There's really a lot to it. And it's a learning process. And also, more than anything, it's an internal process for yourself. It's just as far as reconnecting, learning how to listen, and, to actually pull off to the extent where you can feed yourself. It's quite a feat, actually, but it is doable if you stick with it. So, David, you've been very generous with your time here today. Any parting words or subjects you'd like to bring up? You're such a wealth of information. I don't feel like we've actually heard a lot of what you have to offer, but anything you'd like to finalize our talk with today?
Yeah, and ask you a question. When we're going through this transition here in the next, it's going to be fast. It's going to happen rapidly before 2024. The second magnetic field forming is going to have a huge reaction and effect on human perception, to the point where everybody on the planet is going to literally wake up and see through all of this programming. I don't know if they'll see the actual code going through the unified field here. Like, to that point, they're going to see it. So governments are going to have to respond in earnest. So, what kind of population decline do you think that is going to happen here in the next 12 to 18 months, based on food shortages and the purposeful shutdown of supply chains and the purposeful shutdown of food production, to get people maybe so afraid and so fear-based that they won't actually awaken because they're so terrified, with the jabbity jab stuff rolling around their being, and then at the second time being really stuck in such a paralyzing fear state that they won't see what's literally in front of them that's deconstructed. You have a better glimpse of that. I'm just curious what you might think.
Well, I think the current medical procedure that's being crammed down everybody's throats is a big factor that's going to go in the favor of the controllers because it will reduce the population. Absolutely, I'm convinced of that. There's no way it can't happen. Also, when you choose to modify your genetic material so that those little antennas we call DNA are no longer capable of, reaching larger perceptive bandwidths. They will just be frozen, deer in the headlights phenomena, and they won't know what to do because they can't think anymore. And I believe, not just a simple population reduction agenda, but also to dampen down the consciousness so that people are easier to control in the meantime. So you throw that into the mix of everything that you're talking about, and it's, there's going to be a lot of people leaving the planet. I have no doubts.
You do got to wonder if the delusional psychopaths are really hurting their own chances of centralized control, talking about all these IRS agents being hired, having to get the jabba jabba doodah and then falling ill. How's that going to work out? So we also see fall and rise of empire, and we could potentially watching that as we speak right now too.
Yeah, Michael, one thing on the crypto, proof of time is going to be, proof of work was the old, and now we're coming into proof of time as a new protocol concept here for transaction and verification. So how do you see the crypto space moving forward from here? Proof of time is it. That's the only thing that's really going to make sense, because right now with it's supposed to be so decentralized, but it's really centralized back to the control of the miners. And the mining pools are gargantuan and multi-billion-dollar mining operations in themselves that are listed on the stock markets in some of these countries because they have so much vast capital and they have, acres and acres and acres of rigs out there as one single entity. I can't see that being anything decentralized. But bringing it back down in where everybody's computer across the full integrated network is, chipping away at that, and versus one, mining operation that solves the algorithm that then gets a reward for that. So coming in proof of time seems to be it's going to have to change too, because this whole crypto space, we've already, when the China closed down and said, hey, it's illegal, and then all the computing power went offline over there and the full market crash. That can't continue to happen either if they're trying to bring this up into at least part of the new monetary system, in addition to a basket of currencies, gold, et cetera. And a carbon credit market, which we didn't talk about too much, but this whole carbon trading thing, once your card goes to zero, they're not going to be able to, Randy, I'll call you back. They're not going to be able to, having a forest, you're creating your own carbon credits, but, at that point, what? So you got these three different asset classes rising to create the new economic system: carbon credit, carbon market, for a better word, the crypto, and then the actual physical asset of some sort of basket of currency and gold. So where do you see the crypto going, and as part of this whole reset agenda, reset economic system?
Well, I think it's very obvious that crypto, that the whole entire kind of scene of crypto has been massively co-opted by corporations. I think 99% of cryptocurrencies are run by a centralized corporation with the CEO, COO, et cetera. We have to get past that. The original intention of Satoshi Nakamoto was to go P2P on transactions like you would originally with gold or silver. And of course, that's been all controlled and manipulated by large banking entities, including Bitcoin itself, which when they did the fork to Bitcoin Core and getting off the original intention because of scaling issues, we saw that they went into SegWit and Lightning networks. And of course, as you so profoundly mentioned, the way that the mining systems have become basically monopolies. And what's interesting too, David, with as we're coming into issues as we see with Europe right now and the UK, with massive issues with natural gas and with the ability to generate power because of the green initiatives, which we know are another controlling mechanism. How is that going to play into proof of work? And also, what if we do have some revolution in terms of more free energy? On the flip positive side, how would a proof of work model work if all of a sudden everybody's playing from the same field? So yes, proof of time is everything. And that's what Cordal is all based around. And it really makes a lot more sense. It's a much more Aquarian in that sense too. The metaphysics make a lot more sense. So I do believe that's where we need to be going. And that's what our platform is based upon. But in terms of where mainstream crypto is, I think it's a behemoth in the same way we're looking at mono agriculture. We're looking at all these other problems we've talked about today, which is very, very daunting. And it is scary to see where that's all going. And of course, with China, there will be a black market. There is already with people on the black market still mining crypto. And of course, the big push right now in crypto to counter proof of work, which is what you're talking about with mining, is proof of stake. Ethereum's talking about, well, they're already planning to go to proof of stake. All that is fiat 2.0. It's the same people who pre-mined a coin that own it, that will have the most consensual power on the protocols. So we know that is already dead in the water there. So it is interesting to see that most of crypto is done in my book. And the centralized exchanges are all manipulated and controlled by bots and by the key holders that are running that. So we must get resilient. We must get sovereign with crypto, which is what Cordal is all about. I am a fan of Pirate Chain. Hey, we even do direct P2P. So with Cordal, we have a decentralized exchange built into the project. That's true decentralized exchange, which is P2P, no intermediary, no steward, no one controlling your keys ever on the transaction. And that's going to be extremely important. But we even have cross-chain swaps going with Doge, because while Doge was a meme coin, it was actually like Bitcoin originally decentralized, no pre-mine, even though it's a proof of work coin. We need to focus on those kind of projects for now. So support the projects that are truly as most decentralized as they can be, and then look into projects like Cordal, like Pirate Chain, ones that are truly being run by a community, that are open source, decentralized, no corporation behind it, not really focused on centralized exchanges. That's going to be really important, because they are pushing for the unified digital dollar. That'll be a inflationary mechanism using the Satoshis, where essentially in your bank account, every second, as we talked about, I think on our first show with you, down the line of Satoshis, it's decreasing. It's decreasing in value. So you will not be able to save money, even worse than it is now with fiat, which we know is naturally massively inflationary. That is the plan. That's why they've destroyed crypto as best they can, by using the corporate system, by using the Wall Street 2.0 ideology and forcing crypto down that path. But there are the underground fighting back. There is literally the Star Wars Jedi Knights that are working in the underground trying to combat it. So it is fascinating to watch, and it's also very sad to see where crypto's ended up where it is now. But Bear and I are also big fans of hard currency, of gold, silver, even getting like copper, any kind of precious metals. I'm a big fan of junk silver, pre-1964 quarters and dimes. You're talking about the Amish earlier. I think that's going to be extremely viable way to transact. And I think it's going to be more than just a few people using that in the future. I think it's going to be massive. So I'm a big silver bug too, and gold, but big into silver, junk silver, smaller issuances of that currency that you'll be more easily able to transact with, right? So that's kind of where I'm standing right now with the economics currency system.
And I'm wondering who has satellite base station or be able to have satellite access to still be able to broadcast transactions if there's a grid down in the state or in the States or worldwide. But if you have a generator or some sort of solar capability to still be able to have you sat linked to be able to broadcast that up there, it doesn't really matter what's happening at this point. As long as you have that access point in and out, you can still, have value moving around the planet.
So with Cordal, we've thought of all this. The minting protocol, the way it works, you can literally run it on a Raspberry Pi with a small solar panel. And it's because it's based on time. You have to be connected to a network. We are developing a mesh networking protocol, working through micro communities, and that will connect with a node, whether that be a quote unquote satellite or that be through hardline infrastructure that we recapture through purchasing that. I am a big fan of the hardline because of the negative health effects of EMFs, right? Of wireless technology has a massive negative health effect on our bodies. So if we can figure out that infrastructure and find ways through lawful remedy to recapture that infrastructure from the corporations or redo it ourselves, or using, I think mesh networking is a really interesting solution for that.
We're going to need to think outside the box here moving forward, because it's going to get yanked. Like I've had it on good authority that the entire system is going to get frozen, reset, and then just continue to function day one after the carpet's pulled to cause a crash, and then it's going to get frozen. And then all your access to everything is going to be offline for more than a month. So again, if it extends past that, they're going to expect you to still operate in the real world where your house payment will still be expected on time, even though if you have no way to pay it, could you write a paper check? Well, no, wait, your bank won't cash that check. So they're trying to make you operate in a frozen world while whatever the money movers are resetting their new world. But then the penalties for non-payment on time are still going to apply to you, even though the money pushers have frozen the system so you can't pay on time. So this is another thing to think about moving forward here.
No.
So just saying, I just
yeah,
like the sky's blue. That's what I was told. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. So as you can tell, I'm pretty much a rabid optimist, though, in terms of having belief in that we are moving towards this greater consciousness. I think we should end on a high note here, Bear. And we're seeing it through our community. People are the law of attraction is more than ever from what I'm seeing. People are just flocking to us with solutions, with positivity coming here from, and people, David, just by the way, recently waking up. Like people literally thanks to what's happening with the ridiculous pandemic, people are being shocked into realizing, whoa, this world's not what I thought it was. And they're coming to people like us, to people like you, to find solutions, and they're kind of in a rapid learning curve right now. And we thank God we still have the internet to learn from. So I'm a positivist. I believe we're developing solutions rapidly. I do believe that we're going to come out of this okay, but I do agree also with Bear that those that do not wake up to what's going on are going to be paying a heavy toll. And maybe the Marvel movies are predictive programming us with Thanos snapping and half the population are gone. Maybe there's a reason why they push those movies. So
with superhero movies too, with superpowers, like everybody's going to have superpowers, it can go that direction as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we're seeing it now when on our own bodies, when we're playing around with radiesthesia and biogeometry and meditation and all the stuff we talk about on this show, jumping in ice baths, right? So the greatest technology is right here. We got to remember that, right, Bear? The greatest technology is us. So embrace it. We are full of solutions right inside our consciousness. Bam. Any parting words for our audience, David or Bear? Well, maybe I'll start with Bear and then we'll end with David. And then David, I want you to share all your beautiful links, your website, everywhere, so people know how to get a hold of you. Bear, last words from you.
Well, supply chain. What if we lived in a world where we understood the progenitor of all manifestation and we could recreate the waveforms for every element, make hybrids of elements? We no longer had to mine things out of the earth. We never, again, have to transport goods around the planet. We can create those waveforms to create these elements in a 3D printer kind of operation, set up assembly lines where you can make any part made out of anything you want, manufacture anything you want. And then when you're through with it, reverse the process and eliminate all the need for landfills and everything else. That technology, that understanding is here right now. And it's what we would in fact be doing right now if certain people, weren't pulling our chains this whole time. And the only thing is that we're understanding now is we've allowed it. And now it's just time to, not try to figure out how to survive in their system, but create a parallel system where they become obsolete. And I think some great minds have already suggested that. But we have all the solutions right now, and we're, wringing our hands because we're trying to figure out how to navigate our needs through their system, which has already failed. There's going to be, again, an interim and a transition, and a lot of people will maybe choose not to do so well during that. But again, on a spiritual level, that's choice, and that's the journey of the soul.
Yeah, never give up hope either. I know this is a very special time we're in. This occurrence that's happening now is a once in a 2,000-year event at the minimum that we're looking at. Yeah, the 400 years sinks in there, but it seems like it's a much more powerful, heavy cycle coming this time. This gift was given to us, and it's on a time clock. All traditions and religions talk about this time as being that focal point and transition point from one system to another. And for us also growing into and understanding that part of something, and we're all connected, and it just takes a whole different level in this. I hate to use the word golden age, but it seems that all traditions are pointing to, once we go through this period of time, that when we do come out the other side of it, when the event is finished, that we're going to go through to deconstruct and then reconstruct, that these power brokers and these darker energies are then thrown back to the dustbin of history for how many thousands of years before they can even begin to get a little scratch fingerhold again back on our societies and minds and spirits. But one thing I would consider for everybody out there is know where your local farmers co-op is, because as things go down across the supply chains, the farmers co-ops are going to be the last place that you'll be able to get seeds, fertilizers, tools, implements, and things that you would need to help you grow foods, as well as, there's notice boards there that you can get, and then all the medicines that you need to think about, like the fish antibiotics, fish moxie, fish doxycycline, fish psyllin, which is fish ampicillin. These things are also out there for your farm animals. And if you do a little research on how to use some of these antibiotics, etc., you can find what you might need in the animal kingdom that might help you on the farm as well. A lot of things cross over pretty succinctly there. So make sure you get to your farmers co-op and understand what that's all about. You don't actually have to be a farmer to go in there, but if you have a registered farm and you don't have a registered farm, you're standing out the back for the fuel, because they're given precedence right now for diesel, at least for farm owners here. And it will be the same with seeds in the future. So you're great to go in there now and buy things, but when push comes to shove in the next 6 months, 8 months going into the planting season of 2022, if you don't have a registered farm, you're probably not going to get the seed, and you're going to be buying in 50-pound bags anyway. And then again, if you're buying 50-pound bag of wheat berries, you can use that for many different things, including growing it in trays for your chickens to eat. And there's just a whole cycle of things that you can do that you can find in bulk, because you can buy a 50-pound bulk bag of whatever types of wheat that you're looking for around $15, $16. Even less during the certain times of the year, $13. But if you go into a supermarket, a little 5-pound bag of wheat berries is going to cost you $15. So just think about that in a way to supplement yourself, get seeds, and then stay ahead of the crowd on that too. Because you can turn that wheat, you can, come with a grinder and then turn it into flour. So I'll leave it with that. There's so many solutions, and it is a great time for us to take our world back. It's time to take our world back. Enough of this silliness with the dark energies out there. We're coming into an enlightened period. Take our lives back, our worlds back, and our civilization back. I'll leave it there. Thanks for having me on.
Thank you, David.
Thanks, David. You're always wonderful to talk to. And what's the best place for people to find you that are just discovering you?
Well, watch quickly, because at the end of the month here, YouTube is going to demonetize all channels talking about climate change if you don't kowtow 100% to the CO2 narrative. And YouTube is disappearing history because another term of service, if you're not showing consistent warming, they will demonetize or remove the videos from your channel. So consistent warming, for those of you out there, only begins from probably 1850 to now. Anything prior to 1850 won't count. So YouTube for now, and I'm also on BitChute, Brighteon, Rumble, and Odyssey. Also Adapt 2030 on all of those. My website's still up and functioning, but I've been so busy trying to get prepared on the farm. I just haven't had time to really like keep populating the site. I only have so many hours during the day. And for me, getting prepared, like we're turning over the garden for the winter garden right now. I got to get back out and till after we're done here, but I still need to do another video to load up so I can get my contract finished for the month. So the social media and the website, yeah, there's some stuff there. I'm still trying to do the podcast. But in the real world we're living in, you're making real choices about what you're going to do with your time. And me, I'm getting ready on my farm. So I'm putting less time into the social, knowing that the demonetization's out there. The hit piece from Vice was calling for Patreon to completely remove me and shut down a source of income from Patreon. And they were also calling on all social media platforms to deplatform me completely and remove my channel for disinformation. Because I say the sun's changing the climate, and yes, man has polluted the crap out of this planet with particulates and plastics and heavy metals and runoff. And yes, we did a terrible service to the planet at that. But to put a tiny gas up there that's making all these changes, I just can't believe it. It could be a couple percent, but it's mainly sun driven. And you can see the ebbs and flows of empires through civilization and our timelines of history, at least in the last 12,000 years. And to talk about that suddenly puts me in a criminal category. So when Vice News comes out and writes an entire article about me making money on Patreon and that I should be deplatformed, you know that they don't like the information because there's too much truth in it. And then YouTube, with their new standard platform, I've already been demonetized on 2 videos by human review, which is not supposed to be possible until November 1st, but it's already happened. So you can already see the writing on the wall here. Like, you know, when demonetization comes, if it's not something egregious, they'll say, hey, your video's been demonetized. Click here for human review. Well, somebody's stepped in front of me a couple times already and just flagged the video as non-monetizable. And I loved it that the one video I did was about Arctic sea ice, Antarctic sea ice anomalies in Greenland growing an enormous amount of ice that's unexpected. Arctic ice at the, let's say, 11th lowest this year. And that video was flagged by a human reviewer as showing graphic police violent content because I didn't, and there was no way for me to appeal it or anything, right?
Meanwhile,
so this is the
there's
kind of pushback I'm getting already. So watch it at Adapt 2030. If I disappear over there off of YouTube, I'm going to start putting everything over on BitChute, Brighteon, Rumble, and Odyssey. And I got the Telegram channel just started. So it's Adapt 2030. So I'm trying to move it off my phone onto my desktop so I can start loading articles there. But you can see that the information that we're talking about and discuss today, they want to remove out of public domain. And that's not just me, all the channels, like Christian over at Ice Age Farmer, he had to flee the country. Something happened.
Wow. Oh, wow. I didn't know that.
Yeah,
I know.
he had to flee. He fled the country. So he had to leave everything behind to get out. So if you think these threats aren't real to stop the information flow that we are giving out here, these are the levels they're going to stop this information flow. So what you're hearing here, for some reason, they do not want you to have a leg up on when the changes are coming with our timelines up to 2024 October with the first massive changes here in the beginning of next year. And they really want this information removed because it goes against the carbon narrative and the carbon trading, which will be $150 trillion. They're going to just replace the derivatives market with a carbon trading market and then force you to come in and buy the carbon credits if you want to buy anything that's made in a factory. So then they're going to take more of your income just to have your very basic life. If it came from any kind of vehicle delivered to a store, there's a carbon credit associated with that. You'll have to offset that, pay for it, and you get a certain number of free ones. But after that, you have to pay to play. It's like kind of going to Disneyland. I didn't get right to pass, then I needed to buy another ride. So this is what's happening. And yeah, so.
Well, we need to get you on Cordal, David. I'd love to help you set up a node and just start minting and get your name, get Adapt 2030 on the name. Because the way it works is you get your specific unique name on the chain and that's it. And that'll be your future domain name. So you want to grab that before someone else grabs it. And then that will become your decentralized web address that could never be taken down. So I'd love to send you some info on that. And I know Craig from Radiant Creators, he had interviewed us back in the day when we were years ago.
Because that was right after. I said, hey, Craig, you got to, these guys are on fire, man.
Yeah.
This is the future. You got to go check these guys out and talk to them. And sure, he got you right on there. And I'm super happy that you've taken it to the next level and you're still cranking away and bringing out the great info. I mean, you know how difficult it is to try to get the presence in the social media and keep pushing it, because all this pushback of great ideas, this narrative is so deep and so controlled, and there's so much power behind it in terms of media and technocracy, and the corporate giants that control access literally to the web are all pushing back against this information. And, you know, we're sailing straight upstream for so long. And, you know, now a tidal wave is another tidal wave released from the dam. Stop these guys for their information. You know how it is.
Yeah.
Subs come and then whoosh, what happened to everything? Oh, nobody subscribed to my channel anymore. What happened? You know, and then, you got to tell everybody to come again. It's just ebb and flow of complete interference in the message right now.
Yeah. And that's why we got to help each other out. That's why Bear and I are all about collaborating. We don't care about competition with other channels or any of that nonsense. Dave, if you want to share this content on your channel, please, by all means, please do it.
Love to. I need a copy of it. I didn't record here. You know, I didn't record on this end.
So I will get that to you, because we're all about the future is cooperation, collaboration, open source, everything. I really believe that. So thanks again, David. Such a pleasure talking to you. And maybe we could get you to come to our festival, Music and Sky, next early summer to talk. That's an in-person festival. It's all about solutions. Man, we'd be honored to have you there. So let's keep connected. And thanks so much, guys, for joining us. We had a lively chat in during this time. I love you guys in there. Thanks again, everybody. Go follow David, support him, join his Telegram, because that's one place as of right now that isn't so much being censored or taken down. It's great you're doing that, David. And get outside. Once again, we always end it. Get outside, get your feet in the ground, go plant something. Mother Nature is our best teacher. She will really show you the way. Love you guys. And we will see you next week with, what do we have next week? Veda Austin to go deep into structured water. And it's going to be a really good show. So love you guys. See you next week. Take care. Bye-bye.